There's a 95-year-old man in Omaha, Nebraska, who still lives in the exact same house he bought in 1958 for $31,500. He eats breakfast at McDonald's, drinks 5 Cokes a day, and oh yeah, he's worth roughly $150 billion. But here's the strange part. If you walked up to Warren Buffett today and handed him $10,000 asking him what he should do with it, he'd give you an answer that contradicts almost everything he personally did to become the greatest stock picker in human history. With a completely straight face, he would tell you not to pick stocks. But then, in the very same breath, he'd tell you that if he had your $10,000 instead of his hundreds of billions, he could earn returns that would make Wall Street's best hedge funds look like absolute amateurs. Both statements are true, and understanding why they're both true is worth more than any hot stock tip you'll ever get from a guy on TikTok. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we aren't just talking about Warren Buffett's philosophy. We are breaking down the exact blueprint of what he would do with $10,000 today. Because for decades, people have asked him this exact question, and he actually has 2 completely different answers, depending on who is asking. There's the public answer, the one he literally wrote into his own will, and there's the personal answer, what he would do if he woke up tomorrow as a regular guy with a small bankroll and no reputation. Grab a notebook because one of these answers belongs to you. Disclaimer: I am not a financial advisor, and this isn't financial advice. This is simply a breakdown of what the most successful investor of all time has said, in his own words, about managing your money. 1. The 18% rule. Before Buffett would put a single dollar of your $10,000 into the stock market, he'd ask you one simple question, and your answer might end the conversation immediately. Do you have credit card debt? At a recent Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting, a woman asked him how to invest her money. His answer had absolutely nothing to do with stocks.
He said, if I owed any money at 18%, the first thing I'd do with any money I had would be to pay it off. It's going to be way better than any investment idea I've got. Then he dropped a line that should be taught in every high school in America. I don't know how to make 18%. Let that sink in. The man who compounded money at roughly 20% a year for 60 years, the greatest sustained track record in recorded financial history, is looking you in the eye and telling you that he cannot reliably beat your credit card's interest rate. Paying off a credit card that charges 20% or 24% APR is a guaranteed, risk-free, tax-free 24% return. There is no stock, no index fund, no crypto token, and no real estate course that offers that kind of guaranteed yield. So if part of your $10,000 is sitting in a checking account while you carry a balance on your Visa, Buffett's answer is brutally simple. The debt eats first. Pay it off. Zero it out. 2. Cash you can reach. Okay, the high-interest debt is gone. What's next? Buffett is famously obsessed with survival. His #1 rule is never lose money. And practically, that means never putting yourself in a position where you are forced to sell your investments at a bad time just to pay rent or fix a broken transmission. The household version of that is an emergency fund. And here is a rare piece of good news for us today. Boring cash finally pays. High-yield savings accounts and short-term treasury bills are paying decent interest again, often right around 4 to 5%. For the first time in almost 2 decades, the responsible, adult portion of your money isn't just sitting there rotting away to inflation. It's working. Not super hard, but it's putting in a solid 9 to 5. Keep a chunk of your $10,000 accessible. Secure the base. The boring answer. The will. Debts are handled. Emergency fund is parked. Now what do we do with the rest of the money? Let's look at the strongest piece of evidence that exists in personal finance. When Warren Buffett passes away, the cash he leaves for his wife goes into a trust. In his 2013 shareholder letter, he told the world exactly what his instructions for that money were. Quote, Put 10% of the cash in short-term government bonds and 90% in a very low-cost S&P 500 index fund. I suggest Vanguard's. That's it. That is the entire strategy. The man who built a trillion-dollar empire through legendary stock picking looked at the question of how to protect and grow money for the person he loves most, and his answer was the most boring product in finance: an index fund. The exact same thing your HR department offers you in your 401k. And this wasn't just theoretical advice. He bet real money on it.
In 2008, Buffett made a famous $500,000 public wager with a hedge fund firm called Protégé Partners. The bet was simple. Over 10 years, a plain vanilla Vanguard S&P 500 index fund would beat a hand-picked basket of elite hedge funds. It was the smartest money managers in the world charging premium fees backed by armies of analysts, versus a fund that literally does nothing but own the 500 biggest companies in America and go to sleep. 10 years later, the results were in. The Do-Nothing Index Fund had returned 125.8%. The hedge funds? They averaged 2.2% per year. It was an absolute slaughter. $1 million in the hedge funds gained about $220,000. That same $1 million in the index fund gained over $850,000. It was the financial equivalent of bringing a Formula One pit crew to a race and getting lapped by a guy driving a Toyota Camry on cruise control. When Buffett says he doesn't think the average person can pick stocks, he isn't being condescending. He is telling you that the professionals, the people who dedicate 80 hours a week to this, can't reliably do it either after their fees are taken into account. If you put your $10,000 into the S&P 500 and it returns its historical average of roughly 10% a year, that 10 grand becomes roughly $26,000 in a decade. In 20 years, it's almost $70,000. In 30 years, it's $174,000. And in 40 years, it's nearly $500,000. From $10,000, with the total effort of clicking buy once and then going outside to live your life. But there is a catch. This strategy only works if you master your own psychology. Research shows that the average investor wildly underperforms the very funds they own. Why? Because they panic. They buy when the market is hot and in the news, and they sell when the market drops and things look scary. Buffett said it best: the stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. If you choose the 90-10 index fund route, your only job is to do absolutely nothing. Don't check it when the market crashes. Don't sell it when your buddy tells you about a hot new crypto coin. Just hold. The cheat code personal answer. Now, here is where things get really interesting, because everything I just told you is what Buffett would tell you to do. But what if we flip the script? In 1999, a reporter asked Buffett about his own early returns, and Buffett dropped a quote that the index fund crowd conveniently loves to ignore. Listen to this. "It's a huge structural advantage to not have a lot of money. I think I could make you 50% a year on $1 million. No, I know I could. I guarantee that." 50% a year, guaranteed. His words, not mine. And before you write this off as an old billionaire bragging, he repeated this exact sentiment recently in 2024. Let me put 50% a year into perspective. If you compound $10,000 at 50% a year, in 10 years, it doesn't become $26,000. It becomes over $570,000. In 20 years, it becomes over $33 million. From 10 grand. That's not an investment return. That is a video game cheat code. So, the obvious question, if this man knows how to guarantee 50% returns, why is he telling us to buy boring index funds? Is he gatekeeping the good stuff? No. To understand the 50% claim, you have to look at what Buffett actually did when he was young and working with small amounts of money, because it looks absolutely nothing like what you see on finance YouTube today.
There were no stock charts, no momentum trading, and no top 5 AI stocks to buy now. What young Buffett did was closer to obsessive investigative journalism. In his 20s, he sat in a room and turned every single page of the Moody's Manual, a 20,000-page book of tiny print covering every public company in America. He was looking for companies so obscure and so cheap that they were essentially mispriced by accident. He once found a company called Western Insurance Securities earning $29 a share while trading at $12 a share. He found another company and literally drove around rural Nebraska, going farm to farm, buying paper stock certificates from farmers who had forgotten they even owned them. He was cold calling cornfields. It was door-to-door deep value investing. He can't do this anymore because of his size. Today, Berkshire Hathaway sits on hundreds of billions in cash. They are so massive that if Buffett found a tiny $50 million company today that was completely mispriced and it went tenfold, it wouldn't even move Berkshire's needle. It would be a rounding error. Size is the enemy of performance. Small money, like your $10,000, is a massive structural advantage because you can walk through doors that Buffett hasn't been able to fit through since the 1950s. You can invest in tiny, illiquid microcap stocks that the big Wall Street institutions are legally barred from touching. Conclusion: which path are you on? Which brings us to the ultimate conclusion. We have two answers for your $10,000, and they were never actually contradictory. They are just meant for two completely different types of people.
To get that 50% return, it requires what young Buffett had: thousands of free hours to read financial statements for fun, a borderline sociopathic obsession with accounting. As he said, you have to be in love with the subject, not just in love with the money. If reading 10,000 pages of SEC filings sounds like your idea of a dream weekend, then congratulations. The small investor advantage is real, and Buffett himself envies you for it. Go hunt for microcaps. But you have to be radically honest with yourself. You probably have a full-time job. You have a family. You have hobbies that don't involve reading balance sheets. You don't have 60 hours a week to dedicate to valuing businesses. For 99.9% of us, the index fund isn't the consolation prize. It is the gold standard. It is the exact strategy the greatest investor in history trusts with his own wife's financial future. So, here is your $10,000 game plan in 30 seconds. Kill any 18% credit card debt first. Even Warren Buffett can't beat that math. Park a real emergency fund in a high-yield savings account that actually pays you. Put the rest in a low-cost S&P 500 index fund, maybe paired with 10% in short-term government bonds. Keep adding to it every month. And then do the hardest thing in the world of finance: absolutely nothing. The math doesn't need you to be brilliant. It just needs you to stay in the game. Thank you so much for watching. If you got value out of this, hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the realities of money and investing. I'll see you in the next one.